Subcommittee work session on HB 1351, prohibiting the sale and use of adhesive-based rodent traps. We are expecting one member who is going to be arriving probably in 15 minutes or so. I'm going to recess the hearing until that point and hope that we have better attendance by then. Thank you. reopening the work session on HB 1351, prohibiting the sale and use of adhesive-based rodent traps. And let's just do a pledge of allegiance before we get started. Molly, would you like to read it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'm just going to present a brief summary here of, I think we pretty much know what the bill is about, but when we had our hearing on it, we decided that we are going to send it to interim study because we heard a fair amount of testimony indicating that it was a real problem, but we also heard testimony suggesting that the solution that the bill proposed was not workable as it stood. So the interim study is to essentially figure out if there is a more workable solution, and then decide if we want to recommend that solution for further legislation. And the procedure is that, so we'll have our discussion today in committee, and we'll probably be able to be at a point at the end of the work session today where we can vote as a subcommittee to say we recommend or don't recommend further legislation. And then that recommendation will go to the full committee, and when the full committee meets to vote on all of our interim study bills, then that recommendation will be brought forward at that full committee meeting.
So just as a point to consider, as I understand, something like glue traps are not under the purview of the Pesticide Review Board in the state because it's a non-chemical solution to dealing with rodents. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, this Representative Dutzy was not able to make it today because she had to take her husband to medical appointments. But she did suggest one possibility would be requiring some language on the traps at the point of sale, which would say one or two of the following things. Warning: glue traps are known to entrap and kill unintended wildlife and pets. Use of this product may incur legal liabilities. Or warning: glue traps are considered inhumane and are known to entrap and kill unintended wildlife and pets. Use of this product may incur legal liabilities. So one approach would be simply requiring that labeling at the point of sale. I don't know what the mechanics of that would be.
Thank you. So because of past issues that have been brought before our committee with labeling, we know that requiring any labeling on any product will essentially prohibit that product from the state of New Hampshire, because we are just a minute buyer in the scheme of things. So I think by requiring that, I mean, we went through this with the GMO labeling and everything else, and we had discussed that those products would just no longer be sold in New Hampshire, and that's why that was not a viable option. And so to do that, you would be prohibiting the sale of glue traps in New Hampshire. So I don't believe that requiring labeling in the state of New Hampshire is a viable option.
That's a good point that you bring up, but I remember that you had brought in packaging, and it had already stated on the label that this product should not be used outdoors. And that was the primary reason, was because they didn't want, the manufacturer did not want unintended, non-targeted animals or reptiles or whatever, insects or whatever, to be caught in these glue traps. I believe that there was labeling on these products already.
I don't believe it prohibited it from being outdoors, but it was very specific as to where they should be placed. Because if you prohibit it from being outdoors, then you prohibit it from barnyards, from the barn. So, you know, I believe that it should be, I think it's more specific, like an enclosed area, not just outdoors. And as we heard testimony, nobody is going to place it outside because the dirt's going to get on there and it's going to make the glue, the adhesive, ineffective. I mean, anything gets on there, it becomes ineffective as a means to trap the rodent.
Representative Haskins?
Yes, good morning. Well, I don't think that labeling is going to work. So that's the reason why I'm not going to be supportive of that. I'm working on a bill that has to do with alcohol use disorder. And as a co-sponsor of the bill, we wanted something to go home with each purchase of alcohol. That didn't fly, so what we got was a video message in all the liquor stores. I've not talked to anyone that's ever seen, who's gone into the liquor store, the video message. So, yeah, I mean, I'll say more about what I think we should be doing, but I don't think labeling is going to be effective.
So, okay, Molly?
Thanks. I also think that Representative Dutsey added the part about liability that would not have been implied or included in the labels or the descriptions of use that we saw on the labels that you brought, on the products that you brought in. And I think that would certainly send a stronger message about usage.
But the
Representative Haskins?
Thank you. But the problem with that is the enforcement, right? We'd all like to think that liability matters to producers and consumers as well. But if there's not sufficient enforcement, it just is empty.
And I'll add a comment here, which is that we know that in the realm of that for licensed pest applicators, the label is the law. And in fact, that is also the case for consumers, but most consumers don't realize that the label is the law. And there are many consumers who are not particularly good about reading the labels. So I think that is another another aspect of, making labeling not necessarily as effective as it might be. So, but Representative Haskins has mentioned she has an alternative idea to that, so maybe we could hear that now.
Thank you. Yes, I went back and looked at the testimony that we received when the bill was aired, and at the time I said that glue traps seemed to me to be a 19th century solution to a problem, and surely in the 21st century we should be able to come up with something more humane and equally effective. And so I learned about contraception for rodents, which I had not previously known about. I just want to suggest also that in reviewing the materials, I noted that Fish and Game is opposed to glue traps because they catch non-target wildlife, such as songbirds and snakes. Audubon was concerned because the rodents who take this lethal dose of rodenticide become prey for hawks, owls, weasels, foxes, fishers, and other small mammals. So, second generation rodenticides are more lethal. That's why they're second generation than the previous ones were. So contraception for rodents, I guess, has been out there for a while. I hadn't heard about it previously, But I did talk with a company called Senes Tech, and we had quite a long discussion about the fact that this is approved by the state. It's sold at Amazon now. It's coming to Ace Hardware and farm and feed stores. It's basically a sausage bait. It's a non-lethal method of controlling fertility in rodents. And it's apparently very effective in the places where it's been used more extensively, like California and other places. Rodents mature quickly and have many litters. Yes, every 6 weeks, possibly. So this contraception is, as I say, non-lethal, reasonably affordable. And I think, first of all, with anything environmental, we have to start with mitigation. Whether I'm talking about landfill or plastic or whatever it is, the first case should be, you know, cleaning up the area, making sure that food's not left out, all the things that I hope would be common sense to most people. So you start with mitigation, but that's not been enough. And by the way, I wanted to say that the pest control people did indicate to us at the time that there was no alternative to rodenticides. This is the alternative. I didn't know about it at the time, but yeah, so I'd like to hear thoughts about this. Since these rodenticides are poison, they can get in the food chain and ecosystems. And I really think that their exposure to all manner of pets, the unintended consequences, the non-target animals, is perhaps the chief reason why it seemed unacceptable to me that that's the best solution we could come up with.
Thank you. When for mosquitoes that carry diseases, they use contraceptives a lot. I mean, that's one of the ways that they keep the population down in places. So it can be effective. I just don't think it's immediately effective. But you know, one at a time traps are probably not any faster than contraception. So I would imagine, I don't know, but.
Representative Aaron?
Thank you. I have a couple of thoughts on that. Well, first, with contraception, I mean, on its face, it sounds like a really good idea, but I would worry about upsetting the food chain. I mean, if you're gonna ostensibly eradicate the ability of rodents to reproduce, what will that do to the population that's available for hawks and birds of prey and other animals that do eat those? And I mean, yes, there is a portion of them that may be poisoned, but there's probably a greater portion that are not. And I would worry that it would make a big disruption in the food chain overall.
So Representative Dutsey sent me an article from the Boston Globe about rodent contraception, and the sort of boiled down to the basic conclusion is that it sometimes has some positive effect, but is not, does not completely, get rid of populations. One aspect of it is that as with human contraceptive through pills, it depends on it being taken on a regular basis. So if they only take the bait that has the contraception in it intermittently, then it's not going to be as effective. Um, and we also know that contraception, the pill does not always work. So, and my upstairs neighbor has a grandchild because the pill does not always work. So,
If I may.
I actually am not quite finished with
Sure.
this thought, but one of the things that the article pointed out was that a potential issue is that that might create selective pressure for the rodents that don't particularly like the type of bait, because the if you reduce the reproduction of all the ones who like that bait, then the ones who don't like that bait are then going to predominate in the population. So I don't see it as being an issue with the entire population being wiped out. I do see it as being something that may be a mix in a larger set of approaches, but probably does not actually. It's not going to be the silver bullet.
Well, it definitely is another tool in the toolbox for sure, and a non, poisonous or one. But I also have a follow-up with regard to the point about capturing non-targeted species. I mean, if these glue traps are indeed used indoors as they are supposed to be, they are not supposed to be used outdoors where they would trap birds or turtles or, small turtles or snakes or whatever. I mean, I think that's the problem that perhaps the Audubon Society and others may be seeing, is that the improper use of these glue traps is what's causing the entrapment of non-targeted species. But I would also reiterate the point of the value of having a non-chemical means of eliminating rodents, which is very much used in the food industry and on farms, in barns, in enclosed areas, and in other places that, glue traps make sense to use. So I'm just pointing that out.
Representative Haskins?
Yeah.
Thank you. We're talking about human behavior, right? It's just like the labeling issue. You can tell people what they should be doing, whether they do it or not. I mean, we have so much testimony from all these wildlife associations of reptiles, birds, kittens, all manner of squirrels, foxes. So the lethality is the poison is the part of it that strikes me as untenable, that we ought to be able to increase knowledge, awareness of mitigation, all the simple essential oils, all the things that we wish people would do to start with, removing the food supply, all of that is mitigation. But I do agree that a tool in the toolbox might make a forward motion in terms of reducing the rodent population through a non-lethal means, which appeals to me.
Representative Comtois?
Thank you very much. When we're talking about glue traps, I think we need to understand that rodenticides are not part of the glue trap. They're two separate issues. And glue traps are not poison. They're non-toxic. I was just at a Farm Bureau meeting a week ago, literally, and we were talking about this subject because my job is to bring up what legislation, is happening in Concord. And when I told them about this bill and trying to ban the glue traps, they were like, you can't. And I'm like, well, this is what we're hearing in Concord. Because, and we did talk about birth control and how it has been effective in some areas in helping control the population. So that was also a topic of discussion. We also talked about second generation rodenticide, which I believe the EPA is going to be making a ruling on fairly quickly. So that will not be an arsenal for the homeowner. So that's coming off the table. So you're already taking a tool off. Glue traps very rarely affect wildlife. It's not, I don't believe the impact is there that the second generation rodenticide is, where that is a huge problem for the wildlife. I mean, I won't even use it because of my dogs. Okay. But we have to understand that when you're dealing with farmers, I mean, we have seed, we have food, we have to store this stuff in order to be viable farmers. And they do the best they can to store it in containers, but it still attracts the rodents. And although I think contraception is another alternative and something in our toolbox, we're already pulling a tool off the table that we have to have non-lethal for animals, tools that that can be used. We have to think about everything, not just different segments. And when you're talking about the people that actually supply the food that we eat, we have to give them the tools to make sure that they're being able to control the problem too.
Representative Howard?
Thank you. It seems like we could rank these options as far as toxicity and the ripple effect of that they have on wildlife, on human safety and stuff like that. And it seems that if every one of them is used according to the directions, you know, so the pesticides and the glue traps and the contraceptions, it seems like we're on the verge of ruling out the pesticides because the ripple effect is great with wildlife and pets and stuff like that. It seems to me that if used according to the directions, that farmers need the glue traps. And I imagine they are inclined to use them according to the directions because they don't want their other animals stuck in them. And that the contraceptions are a good complement to that because it reduces the number of animals that are susceptible to be causing problems and stepping on the trap. So also to Representative Aaron's point about the lowering the food chain availability of, it's only vermin who go into your barn, right, or into your house that would be susceptible to these to this solution. So I think that the ones who stay out in the field and do their wild thing are still available to foxes and hawks. And I can on my little acreage, there's plenty of those. So.
So, I'm gonna sort of, up until fairly recently, like last fall, I didn't have any rats in my, on my property, and I considered myself lucky, and then some appeared. And at first they were just in the wood storage shed and around the chicken coop, and I thought, okay, well, I'll just, put out traps and I would get, one or two trapped every week. And that's, does a little bit to the population, but it certainly is not eradicating them. And then I noticed that they were getting into the crawl space in the house. And at that point, I thought, okay, this is beyond my skill set, probably, and I'm going to call a professional. So I called a professional who came out and looked at the setup, looked at, the extent of the garden and the orchard and the chicken coop, and the fact that the chickens are free range. They just fly over the electric fences, so they're free range whether I can try to contain them or not. She said, there are so many food sources out here that there's going to be a lot of difficulty getting them to eat a bait. And so the poison baits, whether the desiccant or the escar, are not going to be useful in this situation. Furthermore, because you have chickens out there, even if you put the escars in enclosed spaces in the house, rats carry them around. So they may end up in the yard, and that would not be good for you. That would be a potential problem for the birds. So she ruled that out. And then she said, your best bet is going to be trapping with traps that are only intermittently firing, so that you can train them to think the food is safe and then it's not, which doesn't include glue traps. I asked about glue traps. She said, for rats, they're pretty useless. The rats are just going to kick dust onto them and then do whatever they want. So,
For mice.
so that basically means that, glue traps are really pretty much a solution just for mice that are going to be running blind, fairly carelessly along runways next to the wall, and are not going to be, they're not particularly useful for rats. Which doesn't mean that they're not useful for mice. So, but I think that there might be some sort of a room for increasing the requirements that they only be used in enclosed areas.
So I think we're all hopeful that the FDA will come out with some, I assume, greater warnings or elimination even of second-generation rodenticides. I think we have the information out there. So for this other idea, what I'm hearing is perhaps this is, as Judy said, the tool in the toolbox to add to mitigation efforts, which in my view, should be happening as well. So reducing a mice population is perhaps one way to add to the other less lethal or at least more effective. I'd love to have them be effective and non-lethal, right? That would be a perfect scenario. I don't know how we get there. But I was excited about this methodology because I can see that it would be, helpful. I've sent for this product. I'm going to give it to my kids who've bought the farmhouse because I don't think they have the first idea what they're up against. So I can report later on, how effective it is. But yeah, I think that's where I think we're at.
Okay, so do you, what do you envision in terms of legislation for this? Is this something for which legislation is appropriate at this point, or is it something where just having the information about the contraception more available would be what we need?
Well, I don't know how effectively we can distribute the information or ask that it be part of the places, the purveyors of traps and of all kinds. Let's hear what our colleagues have to say.
So as far as the contraception, I think that, knowing that we even just had that discussion at my Farm Bureau meeting, that people are now talking about it, means the information is getting out there. But if maybe we could get, places like the Farm Bureau to say, here's an alternative, or maybe put it on somewhere on a website that this is a new product that is now an alternative, for helping with your rodent population. I think it's more about getting the information out. But obviously, the fact I didn't know, I mean, we talked about contraception here in our committee, but then listening to the conversation at our Farm Bureau meeting means that people are hearing it. Now, from you, hearing that it's readily for sale on Amazon, you said. So now the, big retailers are now starting to sell that. So you're starting to see that. And if that goes well, you probably start seeing it in the big box stores or something to that, or your Agways or things like that. So I think that the more discussions you start hearing about means that the information is already getting out there. So that's a positive sign. And maybe organizations, like I said, the Farm Bureau or something, can start putting things out.
Yeah, I recall when the Department of Agriculture had that farm and forest fair in I think it was in Deering earlier this year. There actually was a vendor there that had rodent contraceptive product that she was selling, and so I do think that that is an up and coming method that people are going to become more aware of. And and with any of these things, I really do think the whole issue falls on public education. Educating the public on what are the different means available to them if they're not using a professional service to help them with their rodent problem. I think that, people are becoming more aware of what their choices are. And I do believe that because of, certain, just even, people don't want to be cleaning up after glue traps. I don't think that that's actually a very popular means for many people. There are farmers that still use it, and also food service people who use it in enclosed areas. What the thing is again, education for people to know how to use these products properly, and that's, I think, our biggest thing is educating the public on how to use these things.
Representative Howard?
I agree with everything that the other representatives have been saying. I think that in terms of legislation, this is a ban. So I think that we are not going to forward this because I think it seems like we're in agreement that it doesn't make sense for a ban. So I just wonder, this might maybe a naive question, but is there a way to, as legislators, encourage a campaign about the an information campaign about the contraception so that they know that it's a valid tool in the toolbox?
So one possibility would be getting in touch with the department and seeing whether the IPM program includes this as part of their training for people who are getting pesticide licenses. And so that would be one way of doing it. Another is that the department does have certain informational material on their website, and so we could contact the commissioner and see if this is something that the department might be interested in publicizing.
I think it would be very similar to how the Department of Environmental Services has done an entire public education program to let people know, not to flush things down the toilet that is not flushable because that damages the municipal sewage systems and so on and so forth. So, I mean, our agencies already do a lot of public education in many different areas. And I think this is an area that perhaps the Department of Agriculture could pursue.
Representative Comtois?
Thank you. I really like the idea of the IPM having Director Russo get involved in disseminating this. But I also think that because I mean, some homeowners probably use the glue traps. Most people, as we heard in testimony and even in just talking with folks, are veering away from them. I mean, people are already doing that themselves. So I think it's more in the agricultural sector that use, because not one thing works, because they understand that if there's one thing, then they switch their behaviors. So you just need different tools because you have to switch things up in the arsenal. But I think including asking the director to include that into the integrated pest management program, Representative Bixby, is a great idea.
So, we will get in touch with, the department, what they can do. Probably go through Sean and then he'll direct us to.
Do you have your mic on? Sorry.
All right, just repeat that for, for the record. So, so I think it makes sense for us to approach the department in terms of including this in their educational work. And we probably need to talk to Commissioner Jasper, who will then hopefully direct Director Russo to work this into the pesticide training information and the IPM information.
So specifically, we would be asking them to include contraceptive means in the IPM, and also to direct people, if they are going to use glue traps, that they must use them in enclosed spaces.
Yes.
Okay.
Representative Howard?
And can we sort of formalize that that we don't recommend the ban bill, that we, is that what we've concluded, is we'll advance that back to the committee, right?
Right, so let me just, did you have a specific piece of legislation that you were thinking of, or that was going to work on this, or were you more interested in promoting the idea of the contraception?
Well, you know, my goal was frankly to ban glue traps. There just isn't support for it. So, obviously the education piece is fabulous. I mean, why would we not do that? That's a great idea. But I didn't have other legislation in mind.
Okay, so I think at this point it might make sense to take a committee, a subcommittee vote for our recommendation to the full committee. Does anyone have a motion?
Would it be a motion be to ITL the bill? Would it be okay.
Your choices are recommend this legislation for future legislation, or not recommend for future legislation.
I would make a motion not to recommend.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Representative Howard. Let me just, okay, so the motion is, do we need, we can do this on a voice vote, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so anyone, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Okay, so, so so our recommendation is to not recommend for future legislation, but recommend that the department provide educational material both on glue traps and on contraception.
Yes.
Yes, certainly.
Would it be helpful to also include information about why not to use second generation rodenticides? No, it doesn't, okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's a separate bill, and just to a little bit of more information on that. I didn't read it very carefully, but I did see a list of what the proposed new regulations from the USDA on second generation rodenticides are. And the, while they did not recommend completely banning them for homeowner use, they are only allowing single-use enclosed bait stations for public sale, and then further, and I don't remember what the further restrictions for other sale and use were, but that's the rough, roughly, they were reducing the amount of access that homeowners can have to it. Representative Contois?
Thank you. So my question is, just want to make sure, when they do the single use, I hate to assume anything, but usually when there's a single use being done, it's in an enclosed thing so that the rodent will go into something, grab that, and it will get trapped inside. So I'm not sure if that's what they're thinking as a single use.
I did not read it carefully enough to be able to answer that question, but I'm sure that it's on the EPA website.
Yeah.
And I think I misspoke the first time when I said USDA. It's the EPA that's doing that. So, is there any more business of the subcommittee? Okay. All right. So this session is now closed.